Yeah, g'day and welcome back, TryPod family, to the round 26 NRL preview and best bets. We're here with you for the next hour to break down all the action that will be this weekend. Before we get to all that and more, let's cross to the co-host, the man that makes this all happen. Winnie, how are you going?
I didn't make it happen very well last week. 1 and 4 dismal on the best bets. We did win the mixed matchup special one, including the Matildas. Lost the same game. I actually got pretty close for that one at $6. Look, tough times for my bets really all year. If you put it all together, we're only 41 and 40. As I said in the recap, you can flip coins and you could get that. To some degree, that's punting. We don't want to sugarcoat it, make excuses and say, we're guaranteed we're going to be better than that. But at the same time, we do need to take a good hard look in the mirror. I certainly have. I appreciate the feedback. People reach out to me. I'll get some suggestions, process, show structure, some less constructive criticism, but I take it all on board. What I do want to stress is that I know for sure that I'm very fortunate to do this pod and to do it with you, mate. And people aren't tuning in for my looks or my charm, to be honest. Without profitable best bets, there's no TryPod, in all brutal honesty. So I have to do my very best with that, and I wouldn't continue to do it if I didn't feel I could share worthy plays, because trust me, it's a lonely place sharing losing tips. Like, it's not good for your mental health, your peace of mind. You don't get job satisfaction. So there's a lot of reasons why a lot of tipsters don't have longevity, because it will eat you up. In fact, just one tweet that really bothered me. Someone tweeted, Jacob Wynn's best bets have been terrible. He should be dropped to reserve grade. But look, fair enough, that's their opinion. But you liked the tweet, Clarkey. I noticed that you had actually liked that tweet. So what was up with that?
I don't think so. I don't think so, mate.
Someone brought that to my attention this week. So we could have a bit of inner turmoil going on.
Yeah, I know someone else that lives in Redfern that likes disparaging comments about people close to him, but that certainly was not me. Not a fan of Twitter /X for what it's worth. You mentioned best bets there. Let's jump straight into them. What have you got for us this week?
So I'm missing the graphic. I'll type them up though, so that people can read them. But I'll just speak them out now. So listen up. So I am going New Zealand on Friday over 31.5 team total, which is $1.80 on Sportsbet. They play the Dragons. I don't know what the Dragons are going to bring across the Tasman. I am going to back the Warriors. I think this could be a bit of a finals dress rehearsal, that once again they're not disrupted with their lineup, whereas next week, who knows what sort of team they may actually send to Queensland ahead of, knowing they'll be playing a top 4 finals game. So I just feel, for similar reasons that I've liked New Zealand before, it hasn't all come together for them, but I could absolutely see them clicking and firing. And I'm playing team total over because the Dragons could just approach it with a bit of a carefree style of play. They may have points in them, but I can't see the Dragons holding up for 80 against New Zealand. I'm going to take the Storm the following day. Sorry, against your Titans, minus 18.5 at $1.91. Best price $3.65, but I think it's 18.5 everywhere. The Storm are really on a roll. They look desperate in defense to me. I know they didn't cover the line last week, but I felt like after they started slow out of the blocks, they, took control of the game for the most part. And it's a really important game. The Storm do need one more win to make sure that they will be in the top 4. And in fact, points differential matters as well, because Cronulla are that close and Melbourne has a very losable game in Brisbane. You don't have a couple of your X-factor players, the Titans, going down to the Storm. So I've got a strong home team in Saturday afternoon sun. I'm willing to lay that large line. And then on Sunday, I'm taking an underdog, the Bulldogs, plus 4.5, $1.90 on Better. Again, 4.5 most places. I'm just not sure they're any worse than Manly. I think Manly got that gut punch of their season ending last week in New Zealand. Now you've got Garrick's injured, Schuster's dropped. Even if you want to argue with me, Manly are a little bit better than the Bulldogs. It's a Bulldogs home game, and the Dogs gave a little bit more effort in Canberra than they did against the Knights, enough for me to just back that they'll play this. I see it as a toss-up game. So to get the 4.5, I was willing to jump on there for a best bet. A couple other games I was close on that I'll touch on when we get to them. Thanks for typing those as we went too.
Perfect. That's right, mate. Yeah, I was going to say I tried my best to type them up whilst you were talking there. Some great best bets there. The Storm one, I think, unfortunately, even as a Titans fan, that seems very likely. Saturday afternoon conditions, it just suits with them at home. Bulldogs, Seagulls, I genuinely think that one could be a coin flip. So if you can get some positive plus there on the Bulldogs, I don't mind that at all. and our first one was the Warriors, which is an interesting one because we're going to preview that game a little bit differently. I'm going to go first, and Winnie's going to go after, and maybe offer some potential education to some of our viewers or something of educational value, because I certainly look at things a bit different to how Winnie does in terms of breaking down games. We'll jump into our round-specific preview in just a moment. Before we do, we've got a very special video from a very beautiful man, Tristan Merlehan, the CEO of Top Sport, with some exclusive market insights.
G'day everyone, Tristan Merlehan here from Top Sport. We're into the second last week of the regular season, and there was a lot of favourites secured the result over the weekend just gone, but there was a couple of results, particularly the first game where the Sharks got over the top of the Cowboys, where actually we lost on the game, where most would have probably thought that was a positive result from our end. A couple of the frustrating results, we had a couple of sizable multis running through the Warriors and also the Tigers, where I thought late in both games the Seagulls and the Dolphins may have got the result, but wasn't to be. But the big result at our end was the Knights getting over the top of the Bunnies, where a lot of the multis continue to roll into South Sydney. And obviously the Knights, they just continued on the form of the last couple of months where they've been brilliant. And the Bunnies, they just keep stuttering. And that moves us into some really interesting markets coming into the last couple of weeks. The top 8 market in particular, where we've got a market where the Roosters, they were a big price. They were $15 not that long ago, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. They're into $1.90. The Bunnies are $1.77 now. Obviously no Latrell Mitchell in that game. The Roosters need to get the job done this weekend without Teddy against the Tigers. They should get the job done, but then they move into that match against the Bunnies where they probably will be favourite based on the way that betting's shaping up. You've also got the query over Penrith. Do they play their full strength side, or do they do what they did last year and they rest a number of their players? They have rested some players throughout the course of the last 4 to 6 weeks. So there's a lot of question marks, a lot of queries. We move into this round where the biggest mover and shaker so far has been the Broncos. They've moved from 7.5 out to 10.5, $1.31 now, in from about $1.45. They've been the biggest mover. The Raiders, they need to win one of these games over the back 2, where they will be underdogs in both the games to make sure they're locked in for a finals position. The game that I'm really looking forward to is the Knights against the Sharks. 3.5 point favourites. I think a lot of us thought the Sharks are dead and buried 3 or 4 weeks ago. They've been brilliant. The Knights have been brilliant. I think this will see which one of these sides is a genuine chance of competing with the big boys come the finals. Hope you back a winner over the weekend. Of course, gamble responsibly.
Great stuff there for Tristan. We always appreciate his insight, and we will have a mixed matchup brought to you by Top Sport later in the show. Let's jump into our round-specific preview.
In fact, can I interrupt you there, Clarkey?
Yeah,
if you haven't got the Bulldogs best bet yet, 6.5 still available on Sportsbet at $1.84. So that's getting through that key number of 5. Thought it had come through that everywhere, so that's an even superior bet. So appreciate Bopper with the heads up there.
Are you going to change
also on
the
New
best...
Zealand tab?
Are you going to change the best bet to that, or are you going to stick with plus 4.5?
Feel like if I've shared it on Better, and some people have already backed it, then I've got to live with that one. But I just want to give people a heads up that there is an even better one that I'm not sure what's going on there, unless some news is just broken. It was not available that I saw when I was just looking prior to jumping on here.
All right, let's preview that game right now. I'm tipping the Seagulls by 5. No, I'm only joking. Let's jump into Thursday night. It's the Panthers v Eels at Bluebet Stadium, and the line is set at minus -10.5 in the Panthers' favour, who welcome back Brian To'o. So Thomas Jenkins drops out. Kenny, Sorensen, and Targo all remain sidelined. One change for the Eels. Sean Lane returns now. On the surface here, a really easy one to tip, and I assume you're going to see it that way in your breakdown.
You know what? I actually considered a best bet on Parrot, but I'll explain why. I start with a crazy statement. I look at the Eels squad and I think to myself, is that the strongest team I've ever seen that's over a 20-point underdog? Because it's a full-strength back line. Yes, no Moses, and they missed him last week, but Brown's back. Joey Lussick's done well at 9. You got international props. You got Madison. Hopgood's been a great pickup this year. And Sean Lane returns and is on the bench. It's Para's final game of the year, so you could argue it's that final effort. It's a derby, and it is the team that crushed him in the grand final. So that would be why you'd play the Eels. And if I could have got plus 10.5 first half, I would actually have added that as a best bet. And this line is 20.5 in some locations. So I thought that was possible, but I just couldn't quite get it at a playable price. So I left it alone. But there you go. That was a strong lean. However, the reason it's not a slam dunk is because it's Penrith, in Penrith. And then next to full strength, Biz is back. I know Tango's still out. And we talk about revenge for the grand final, but the Premiers, they don't lose many games. They did lose to Para in the encounter earlier this year, so they could also play the revenge card. And nobody knows what Penrith's plans are going to be for round 27. So I do wonder if this is a game they see as their final, last full hit up before the finals. And we know that the Panthers are untouchable when they really ramp it up, whereas Para's season is over. So you've got to question their motivation. There's reasons why they might be up for this, but it's just a case of if Parramatta gives Penrith an inch, they'll take a mile, and they would take great satisfaction piling it on and kind of sending Para to Bali on a number of, big defeats.
Yeah, and that's the thing that makes this so hard to tip in terms of that line. It's the rivalry between these sides, and it can bring out the best in either side. And for the Eels, we're not even talking like the best to win. We're just talking the best to not lose by more than 3 converted tries. But it's still a question mark. And I think that question mark, well, I know it obviously comes from how dominant the Panthers are. So the Eels have lost 12 games this year. These two sides met in the grand final last year. Since round 1 of 2020, Panthers have only lost 11. Meaning the Eels have lost more this year than the Panthers have in the past 3 seasons. But you can make that argument for a lot of sides. You look at the Eels, and they did beat them in both games last year in the regular season and again in round 4 this year, where the Eels recorded their first win of the season. I remember I tipped that one too. It was really bold at the time. But I actually think that really hurts the Eels here. There's less chance, particularly with the rivalry, that the Panthers sort of come in and underestimate them or take them a little bit easy. So I'm gonna lean the way of the Panthers here, especially at home. Broncos did shock them in round 1. Outside of that, they've not lost at Bluebet all year. They have lost one other home game, but it was that one that was pouring down in Bathurst against the Tigers, not Bluebet. I don't really count that. Eels are 3-5 against the Panthers recently. Those 2 losses being when it mattered in the finals last year, which is obviously unfortunate for them. But I'm feeling with the Eels conceding 35 points in their last 7, it could be a bit of a blowout here. I could really see the Panthers just putting in pure domination, putting their rivals to the sword and saying, see you later. We're not seeing you in the grand final this year. Go now. So I think this is the Thursday night one. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with my pick here. I'm going to go Panthers at the line. Panthers first team to hit 30. Peachy, Cleary, and To'o, anytime try scorers. That's about $12.50. So something you can have a little bit of a play on and makes the game exciting. From that perspective.
You know what? I've got an observation that Nathan Cleary, when he's leading into big games, whether it is before the finals or before Origin, he tends to run the ball a bit more. It's like he's getting himself into prime gear. So I don't mind that pick at all. You can't go wrong with whoever you pick in the Panthers back line, certainly once they're firing on all cylinders, and there's a big chance they could be on Thursday night.
And that's the thing with Panthers same game multis. You sort of pick out your usual suspects, your Brian To'os, Crichtons, etc. But then you've got to find that one value dude. What about the multi last week? It was $20. Their value guy was Isaiah Yeo. Really, outside him, the rest of the try scorers made sense. And what about return? Was it 22 or 40?
Yeah, it was like 2,000 to 1. So,
wow.
I think, was it $20 on at that price? Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a bad payday. I mean, had to pick 6 or 7 try scorers. As you said, Yeo was probably the unlikely one, although Crichton was the one who that punter would have been stressing about, only scored with a couple of minutes to spare, but cash was all the same.
Absolutely. I love seeing multis like that because I just know they are so hard to hit. Let's jump into our Friday night game. We're over at Mount Smart there in New Zealand. It's the Warriors v Dragons, and the Warriors are 16.5-point favourites. They're expected to welcome back to Matty Martin, but at this stage he is in the reserves. For the Dragons, 1 return. Zach Lomax returns at centre. Another one for me, you don't have to put too much thought into your tip here. I'll go first with this one, like I said, and our viewers will see why sort of at the end of it, because when I look at games and break them down, I go very stats-orientated, you guys might have noticed. And my first observation here is the Dragons line at 16.5. They've not been beaten by that amount since round 18, and that was against the Sharks. They've only been beaten by that line 5 times this year. 2 of those were to the Sharkies, and 1 actually was the Warriors on another occasion in round 17. Whereas for the Warriors, covering that line of 16.5, they've only done it 5 out of 22 games. So for me, I get that as an almost 3/4 chance of that occurring in terms of Dragons covering the positive line. And I actually will take that and give Dragons some chance here. My concern that I must get out there is the Dragons are 0-11 away from home this year. They literally have not won a single game outside of their home stadiums, but they don't need to win here. They just need to not get absolutely pumped. I think you look at the Warriors, they have only covered that line 4 times this year, as I said, so an 18% chance. And their last 4 games, they've won by an average of 6.5 points. So about 1/3 of that line. So the Dragons really give me no reason to be confident, but just based on sort of the mass breakdown there, I actually am going to take them here. And we had a discussion about this today, and when he pointed out some really good stuff that I thought some of you guys might find interesting. So let's go over to you for what you're picking in this game.
Yeah, so you kind of explained, look, the Dragons haven't lost that many by more than 16 points. The Warriors haven't won that many by more than 16. So doesn't the logic say kind of law of averages that it would be unlikely that New Zealand would cover? But my counter argument was, well, not that many games have had a line this high, so you wouldn't expect, like, no team other than maybe Penrith wins a majority of games by, 3 converted tries. And no team in the comp loses a majority of their games by more than 3 converted tries. So when you get an extreme line, you can't really stack up the rest of the season and say, that's indicative, because it's an extreme line for a reason. New Zealand are superior to St. George. I mean, in my mind, they're a good, 12 points better. And then I factor in home field and travel. And then the fact that I don't really know how motivated or how desperate St. George will be. And that can so easily mean that you open up, even if you fight for a period of the game. I can see the Warriors potentially running away from it. And that's if they don't jump them from the start. So I came into this knowing I could only play New Zealand. And I know I've said it's similar the last 3 weeks. I definitely think, again, this can be the game where they get through their gears. What I admire about New Zealand is, although they've been below their best, they've still won games. And not only have they benefited from, a really home-heavy schedule, and this is another home game, but very few injuries and suspensions. So it's every reason why they can fire here. And while St. George, came out firing against Storm last week and didn't totally go away, and Lomax should be back, I just don't know if they're going to be able to repeat that effort. That's something I've said the last couple of weeks. It hasn't been too successful, but it's still something I believe that the least trustworthy teams are these sides with little to play for when they're away from home late in the year. And as I said before, when I justified the best bet, similar to Penrith, is this the last time that New Zealand lines up full strength prior to the finals? They could have that opportunity to rest a couple of guys up. It's all the more reason why they may switch it on. So again, my best bet was team total over 31.5 at $1.80 on Sportsbet for the Warriors.
And that really has been the blueprint Panthers have used in recent years. They get to round 27, rest a bunch of players so that it's almost a bye and they come into the finals fresh. Warriors, I think, should win here. And then that would almost cement them definitely in third. So you do make a good point there. I'll stick with my tip. The Dragons, realistically, outside of the maths there, the Dragons give me no reason to be confident. But I'll stick with it, and we'll see how it goes and put it to the test. And I can see Justin here on YouTube. Justin Core says, you can get Eels plus 10.5 plus 10.5 in the first half on PointsBet. Justin, can we just get an odds check on that? Because we won't tip it if it's $1 under.
I think he has said $1.83, but I'm happy to pass it because I think we've discussed the reasons why it could go pear-shaped as well. So I appreciate that. That could be a borderline play for some people if you're brave enough to take Para and you want something to start your round off and get some action Thursday night.
Awesome. And don't forget, guys, every week we will be cooking up a same-game multi, thanks to Better. And our Better sign-up link is in the show description here live, and if you were listening as a podcast. And, of course, if you do sign up, make sure to message the TryPod page on Facebook and let us know. But before you sign up to any bookie, think, what are you prepared to lose today? Set a deposit limit. For free and confidential support, call the number or visit the website on screen. Winnie, our next game is Cowboys v Dolphins. Will this be your better same-game multi, or you're undecided at this point?
I think more likely we'll go the early Friday again. We went that close. I said on the recap, we had Warriors to score 36 or more last week and DWZ for a double. He had that double inside 16 minutes, but the Warriors slowed their scoring and got stranded on 29. Otherwise, we would have hit yet another one. But that's been a shining positive of this year. It's been the same game multi results have been off the charts.
Yeah, and I love it when you tie the same game element into best bets, the mixed matchup, vice versa. It just seems to really generate those really positive results. When it's good, it's great under those circumstances. But let's jump into that game. It's Dolphins v Cowboys at Suncorp Stadium, and the line is set at -8.5 in the Cowboys' favour, who will be without Jeremiah Nanai. So Helam Lukey starts in. Fini Fuiaki moves to the bench. Kyle Laybutt moves to the centres, and Murray Taulagi is back on his preferred position on the wing. Dolphins, they welcome back the hammer. Nicarima goes to the halves, and Lemu Elu and Kenny Bromwich both return for them. How are you seeing this one? It's an interesting one because the Dolphins are a tough side. They've got some big inclusions back. But for the Cowboys, their backs are absolutely against the wall. And I think they might know in the back of their mind that if we can get a win here, we could be versing a reserve-grade Panthers side next week. So how do you see this one when you break it down?
That's right. I mean, from a Dolphins perspective, we've all seen them kind of fall away. Certainly in terms of the losses have piled up, but they did lead the Bulldogs and the Tigers very late as well, as they haven't given in every single game. We've also said for the last probably 6 weeks that we feel the Finns will have 1 or 2 big punches left in them. Well, now they're at home for those final 2 games, and they both are at Suncorp, and it is against a Queensland rival for what it's worth. The Finns are trying to win over some fans that live north of Brisbane but south of Townsville. You've got Hammerback, Kabrom, Lemuelu, I've mentioned before. They're key contributors as well. However, the Cowboys are definitely still the stronger side, even though Nane succumbs to the shoulder and he's out again and still no Val. North Queensland was so disappointing. That was one of my losing best bets last week at home to Cronulla when the season, when their destiny was in their hands. Now it's not anymore. However, the Cowboys kind of know that they'll need like Souths or Canberra to lose, and they'll need to win in Penrith next week. But for reasons that we have covered multiple times, that's all still possible. So it's simple to say this is do or die for North Queensland, and you don't want to bet against sides too often who are in that scenario. You've also got the fact that the Dolphins already upset North Queensland earlier this year, so there's an upset to avenge. And I can't imagine the Cowboys want to be the only team that would lose to the expansion squad or the expansion club twice. The Dolphins haven't beaten anyone twice. They've got the opportunity to do that on Friday night. So in my mind, I see North Queensland sizable favourites. That feels right. A few weeks ago, we all thought that the Cowboys had recaptured their 2022 form and they had everyone hyped up. But in those last month, they've really lost that mojo. So I can't be sure they're going to find it again. Yes, North Queensland should pull together and keep their dream alive and should play strong here. But I can't be sure. So that's why I left it alone.
If the Rabbitohs and Roosters did a draw or played to a draw in round 27, that would mean the Cowboys go through as well. Stranger things have happened, man. I remember the Cowboys were literally all out fishing and drinking beers because the Dragons, who had dropped to 8th at that point, but were first earlier in the year. This is going back to 2015 or 2017? 2017. Yeah, and so they're all out drinking. And then they just checked the result all of a sudden. And the Bulldogs, who were last at that stage, beat the Dragons somehow. So the coach, Paul Green, actually at the time, rest in peace, Green, he gave him a call and said, everyone get back to training tomorrow. We're in the finals, baby. And they went all the way to the grand final. So strange things can happen in this sport. As for this game, I'm really on the fence. I'll say it now. I don't think I'll have an official tip or pick or anything in this one. On one side of the coin, we have a Cowboys side who at stages this year have shown us they are more than capable of beating the Dolphins by 9 points. When they're at their best, absolutely they will do that. But on the other, we have a footy side in the Dolphins that has shown up for a lot of games. They got some big inclusions back, but they still do concede an average of 27 points this year. They do score an average of 22. So there's a difference there of about 5. The line probably sits, pretty correct when you look at it that way, given you give the Cowboys the edge. Dolphins have only won 1 of their last 10, but they are 3-5 against Queensland opponents this year. Those 2 losses being to the Broncos, who, of course, we don't put in the same category as the Cowboys. It is Peter Hiku and Jordan McLean's 200th NRL games. But given how they played last week for Tamalolo's 250th, I'm not going to look into that at all, unfortunately, for Hiku and McLean. All things considered, if I've got to give a tip with a gun to my head right now, I will say Dolphins plus 8.5, given they're back at Suncorp. And we just know Wayne Bennett has that magic that he can just get sides and get them back. But just that record, man, of one of their last 10. I can't tip that. I've tried a few weeks. I've tipped the Dolphins now. And yeah, I've just got to stay away. So no official play for me on this one. Saturday, 3 p.m. It'll be at Amy Park. I'll be there. It's Storm v Titans, and the line is set at minus 19.5 in Storm favour. Ryan Pappenhausen currently in reserves, might return. Josh King out. Nelson Asafa-Solomon to lock. For the Titans, they're without Jaden Campbell, but that's largely mitigated by the return of Kieran Foran at 6. And Philip Sami is out, and Jojo Fafita returns to the wing there. I think I know your tip here. It is fairly obvious. You've gone over it, but I do want you to go into it. Why are you so confident on Titans 13 plus in this one?
Largely mitigate. Oh, hang on. When did Kieran Foran become as good as Jaden Campbell? I know what you mean positionally. One 6 goes out, another comes in, a more specialist 6, but they're not in the same stratosphere. In terms of how much they scare the Melbourne Storm, I don't believe. And when you're going to spring a massive upset, you need those kind of X-factor weapons. And as you mentioned, the Titans will be without a couple. I think the fact that Melbourne didn't cover last week's in our favour too. In fact, the 10-point margin of victory flattered Melbourne, but I still believe they've really built momentum towards the finals. It just seems like a side that, just hearing the interviews with Bellamy, the players, the energy that they're playing with, that these games mean a lot to them. And I've seen it, the defensive desperation, that they're not giving up easy opportunities, albeit they started a bit slow out of the blocks last weekend. As I mentioned at the top, you've got to win this game to stay in the top 4. You might not even be in the top 4 by the end of the round, because Cronulla will play on Sunday. And not only this round, but Melbourne knows that it's a tough trip to Brisbane next week. Who knows what that holds? And because of the points differential predicament, Melbourne would love to have a big buffer and then actually have the flexibility to maybe rest 1 or 2 players that may need it for the Brisbane trip. However, if they don't win this game well and Cronulla wins the following day, Melbourne would have to play their strongest side in Brisbane, and you still could lose and actually miss out on the top 4. And after Melbourne let that slip a year ago and then bowed straight out of the finals, I feel they're acutely aware of all this. So when I've got a team that's, close to a 20-point favourite, but winning by a big margin is meaningful, and they would be aware of that, and they're at home and it's a day game, and I won't repeat myself, everything I've said about, these teams with questionable motivation late in the year, but like the Titans actually fought pretty hard against Penrith and still lost by 24, 26 points. And again, these sides that are lower on the ladder, they don't always do that consistently. So we could get an easy win if the Titans kind of capitulate, which is a distinct possibility. And even if the Titans play hard, I feel like Melbourne are so determined and in such good form, they could still bring the best bet home for us, which was just minus 18.5.
And in all seriousness, I did break this one down in detail last night, and we have only beaten the Storm 7 out of 26 times in our club's entire history. And of course, one of those games was earlier this year, I think it might have been round 4 or something at home. We won 38-34. The Storm were off their game last week against the Dragons. And given that we did shock them early this year as sizable underdogs, I highly doubt they make that same mistake again. I just highly doubt it. The Storm are too professional to make the same mistake twice in a row. We rarely see them lose to sides two times in a row in a year. 2 losses in a row. It never happens for the Storm. They learn from their mistakes. They're very, very professional. So I think you have to play Storm here. I do agree. It's extremely likely they will cover that line. I think as a Titans fan, a win here, and for those that are listening as a podcast won't know, I'm doing quotations with my hands, but a win here is just to be able to compete and try hard for 80 minutes. Simple as that, because when you look at this side in the Melbourne Storm and our side, you look at recent form, the Storm are all class and quality, clearly a level above the Titans, and then you factor in some of the Titans' injuries as well. You just really, even as a big Titans fan, I can't give them much chance here. So my pick here, Winnie, Storm at the line. And we have conceded some extremely soft tries this year to opposition forwards where they've just literally fallen over the line. Isaiah Yeo last round, Jared Wallace off the bench for the Dolphins, just to name a few. I want you to tell me right now, which one of these Storm forwards scores a try against us? Kamakamitha, Welch, Loiero, Katoa, or Asafa Solomona? You got to pick one.
Loiero on an edge comes to mind for me.
Man, I tell you, we concede some really soft tries randomly to forwards. So that's honestly, I'm adding that to my pick. Sliero, anytime try and Storm at the line. I can see there we've got a mixed matchup, so I'll go over to you for that one.
Yes, that's right. So we're going to try and leverage off a couple of the big favorites that I like and keep it pretty simple. Warriors and Storm to outscore their opponents by 40 plus points at 235 on Top Sport. Max stake 200. Our promo code Toppy is TP Live. So it is an underdog because you add their lines together, they should outscore their opponents by about 36. But I like the upside in this because I think either of them could win 30 or 40 plus on their own. So note that you don't even need them both to win. If one won by 50 and the other could actually lose by 8 or whatever, but more likelihood they're both going to take care of business. They're both, I think, probably winning their games 20 plus, but yeah, either one can do more of the heavy lifting at a plus odds price there. And although the best bets have struggled, we did win another mixed matchup last week at least.
Mate, I'll be there in Amy Park. I'm not looking forward to this one. I was about to say the Storm could probably do that on their own. I hope that's not the case. Let's jump into our next game. It's the Roosters v Tigers. We're at Allianz Stadium where the Roosters are minus 15.5 point favourites. They welcome back Sam Walker at 7, so Drew Hutchinson drops to 18th man. Joey Manu's at fullback with James Tedesco unavailable. Angus Crichton and JWH return for them also. For the Tigers, just one change. Coruscant's back to hooker and Will Smith comes in at halfback. Now, Roosters are riding a super hot streak right now. I have to think you're tipping them there. And did you come close to that line or you just got a little bit tempted off? What happened there?
Well, Harry Potter says $200, Max. We wouldn't waste his time. So it must be nice. Harry's doing all right. I guess when once you defeated he who shall not be named, you're doing all right for cash there. But I think a 200 max stake is pretty decent bet size for, I would say, a large majority of punters. Best of luck in any case. Look, in this game, I'll tell you now, like in terms of tipping, can't envision that the Chooks would let this game slip. But I didn't quite get there playing it either. For one, I talked about how the points difference could be crucial for Melbourne. It's unlikely to be a factor for the Roosters. So I just get this sense knowing that they've got to win the next 2 games. And next week is such a look-ahead spot, knowing that the season, likelihood comes down to that mouthwatering encounter with Souths. Could the Roosters do just enough to win? And if you lay the line, is that your concern when they're up 8 or 10 and they're not pushing it late in the game? It's going to be great to see Sam Walker back, but you can also imagine simplifying the game plan, reintegrating him. It has been a long time since he's been in the first grade squad. And on top of that, I know we just lost a best bet last week, expecting maybe a bit too much out of West. But I go back to the fact they're not the worst side. They're not as bad as your typical team that would be running last out of 17 sides. And I mentioned a week ago, West had actually fought hard 6 straight weeks. So now you can make it 7. Benji in charge could keep that energy level elevated through to the finish line of this year as well. So while Roosters will most likely win this, I think West could make it interesting. That's why I pass.
And I'm just trying to scroll here because I know when the West beat Panthers earlier this year, they did back it up the week after with the Dragons. And they almost backed up their win over the Cowboys. They lost by 1 point to the Raiders, who we know at that stage were a top 4 side in round 14. I think simply you have to tip the Roosters here. I do love the inclusion of Sam Walker for the Roosters. I think he can be a real spark and excitement for their lineup. But that's playing the optimism card, right? You could just as easily play the pessimistic card and go, well, he's been out for so long. The match fitness isn't there. He might look a little slow. He's coming off a serious injury. It might take him a game or 2 to get back up to speed. For the Tigers, I really don't like Will Smith at 7. I think he's a great utility. I probably don't think he's the best halfback option. He has played there before in his NRL career and reserve grade 16 times, only winning 5 of those games, all in reserve grade. The Tigers, they also don't have that many strengths. I think you can say Coruscant and their edge back rowers, and the Roosters lineup is more than quality throughout to really shut down their strengths and really run away with this game. But I do think this is where the risk comes in. The risk is if, as you said, they're looking 1 week ahead. They're thinking we've got our arch rivals next week to make it in the finals. And we've seen how dangerous that can be for sides this year, overlooking their opponent and perhaps getting 1 step ahead and looking too far into the future. Roosters have won 16 of their past 17 against Tigers, and Tigers have only won once at the stadium here out of their last 10 times. Horrible record there for the Tigers, great record for the Roosters. My notes here, I like Roosters at the line. I was going to give that as my play. I'm going to stay off it. Just hearing what you had to say there, I think there was a comment Ryan said you could go either way. So yeah, I'm going to stay off this one. 15.5. And the Tigers have fought this year. They have fought this year that they could stay within that. So I'm not going to give a tip for that one. That's a tough one. Now, I mentioned the Rabbitohs in that one. They have a bye this week, so we're actually not going to preview anything to do with them. But they do have a very, very important game next week against the Roosters. I want to take a pause from our game analysis for the round. I want to go straight to the Bunnies. I want to talk about what might be wrong with the Bunnies. There's a lot of speculation, so many rumors around the club at the moment. Since round 12, they've only won 4 games, beating Dragons, Warriors, Titans, and Tigers. So 3 of those sides very lowly ranked. So I want to go straight to you. What do you put this poor run of form down for South Sydney, who at one stage were premiership favourites or premiership contenders at the least?
Yeah, I felt like we had to talk about them tonight, and they're not playing, so we dedicated our whole segment to this, and part of it is me fessing up too, because I've been guilty of being on them. I'm going to go glass half full, and not everything I say I'm going to completely believe, but let's start with trying to find a positive perspective for Rabbitohs fans. They still control their destiny. They get 2 points this week. If they win next week, they'll get into the finals. So from this point on, they've got to win 4 in a row, make a grand final, obviously 5 in a row to win it. But getting a bye in advance of those games does give them some hope. You think of teams that have made runs in the past. It's very rare sides can get there from outside of the top 4, but you get sides that could be in the top 4, lose one tough game, like Penrith a couple of years ago did lose week 1 of the finals, still made it. So just because you don't get a bye during the finals doesn't mean you can't win it. I know that the bye this week is also potentially a negative because Latrell got the 1-game suspension and now he's going to be out for the do or die against Roosters, but you'd still probably rather have the bye. In my opinion, if you can't beat the Roosters without Latrell, how far were you going to go? Whereas if you can beat them, then you get that boost in week 1. And honestly, if Souths pull it together and beat the Roosters in round 27, most likely they'd probably be a favourite in week 1 of the finals in a bottom 4 encounter. So I just can't quite write them off. We talk about having to have fuel in the tank in September. Again, for a positive note for Souths, if they get in and they finish 7th or whatever, you could argue they've put in the least effort of any team that's ever made the finals. So if there was a side that could flip a switch, then you couldn't rule them out because the capability is there. We have seen it. We don't need to go game by game, but they won 6 in a row against some strong opponents. You can't fluke that. And I know we're going to criticize the Sunday performance, and that was a losing best bet. But if you were going to cut them some slack, you would have to say the Knights really are a strong side. They are red hot. The crowd was electric. I do think Newcastle got some good bounces, some good calls. There's an 8th tackle set try. There's an intercept try. There's a ball hits a ref try. There's some blown chances for Souths. I don't want to make excuses for them, but just saying a lot of people are going to completely write Souths off. But if they did have a resurgence, maybe we'd look back and say, yeah, maybe it was just a bit of a perfect storm. They did also have 5 weeks to travel. Again, not an excuse because I knew those facts going in and I still tipped the Bunnies. I just wanted to cut them a little bit of slack before we go in on them. Now, someone said someone's muted, but obviously you can still hear me, Clarkey. So now I'm going to go in on Souths. Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned in the recap, Ponga was phenomenal. We carved up the Souths right edge. I also mentioned, and it's not for the first time, Latrell is way too cool. It's alarming how casual he can be. We referred to the misconversion from in front. We referred to letting bombs bounce, referred to a one-handed pickup error. But while watching the game live, I thought a couple of those first Knights tries just looked a bit funny. It wasn't until I saw the replays broken down where you realize the second and third Knights tries were very preventable by Latrell if he was in position and willing to put his body in front of Marzu. He takes the easy, half-hearted intercept attempt, not once but twice, and the Knights score almost the same try. And I think right there, it's so emblematic of the heart of the problem. Your leaders have to lead by example. He wasn't putting his body on the line. I'm sorry, Darius Boyd is out there somewhere about to catch a stray because it comes to mind that those Broncos teams that were, had no heart in 2019, 2020, because he was one of the leaders. He didn't set the standard that, was required. They've lost 3 of their last 5. They've been favourites for all 5. You said it there. They've lost 8 of their last 12. And then when I throw to you, Clarkey, there's obviously been a lot of rumors and reports about Latrell, Cody, Cam Murray, Demetrio, Sam Burgess. You can refer to any specific ones that you've heard if you want. We don't know what's true, but when there's smoke, there often is fire. And when the output on the field is not matching the ability time after time, I have to think there's something underlying. And so I'll take accountability for my performances in terms of I've picked Souths the last few weeks. We've only won 1, lost 4 best bets. I also tipped them to make top 4 about 5 weeks ago, thinking I was buying low. And while those odds did shorten a couple of weeks later, they're in danger of missing the 8 right now.
Can we change that bet slip? Can we call it right now and say, we meant to press 8 actually as an accident? But in all seriousness, you go back to round 11. They beat the Tigers there 20-0. From that point, the Eels beat them in round 12. If they are to beat the Roosters next week and go into finals, that'll be 5 wins since round 12, which gets them in finals. And I know their CEO was very optimistic when he spoke today, saying, we believe we've got the side to go on a run. But the reality is, you're telling me you've won 5 games since round 11, and you're going to win 5 in a row against the elite of the elite in do-or-die situations where the pressures are the highest. Unfortunately for South, I don't buy it. And footy's such an interesting game, particularly with the media side of things, because if Rabbitohs are winning games, no one's spreading these rumors. No one's talking about these reports. No one really cares. You might get a 1-page write-up in the paper. NRL 360 might cover it for 5 minutes, but because they're struggling, all these stories sell well for journalists, and it's all interesting stuff that us as fans just lap up those rumors and that interest. For me, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to try to keep it nice and simple. I wonder if Sam Burgess being an idol to these players might have given him a stronger voice to some over Jason Demetrio in the locker room, who, just like Burgess, was an assistant coach only a few years ago for a lot of these players. When Jason Demetrio was the assistant coach of the Bunnies, the bulk of this side and the leaders of this side were still there, just like Sam Burgess is now. Burgess himself is now a head coach over in the UK as of next year, and as of today, the Rabbitohs did move him on early. Some reports and speculation, I guess, suggest that he wasn't seeing eye to eye on a lot of things with Jason Demetrio. He wanted to make a few changes that JD didn't. So I wonder, was that playing into the players' minds? Some on one side, some on the other, potentially. But I think the simplest answer, without any need for deep analysis, is Cody Walker and Latrell Mitchell are out of form. That's their 2 key players. You go back to all their wins this year, all their impressive wins, generally, 8 out of 10 times, those guys are playing 8 out of 10 games. They're playing brilliant. Since returning from Origin, Cody Walker only has 3 try assists. The last time he returned from Origin, this happened as well. His form fell off a cliff, but he was dropped mid-series, so we kind of attributed it to that. Now we just sit there and wonder, can Cody Walker sort of manage the NRL season as a whole, maintain that form post-Origin whilst featuring in Origin? Well, the answer could be no, because we've only gotten 3 try assists from him since he returned. As for Latrell Mitchell, probably the most hated player in the game. We don't need to rag on, but he's not as involved as they need. And when he is involved, it's for the wrong reasons. It's throwing those silly passes against the Knights, trying a little bit too hard, maybe scoreboard pressure, feeling that, someone needs to stand up for this team, I'll do it, and just making a silly play. So yeah, that's my analysis there. I'll go the coach and I'll go their 2 key players not standing up. Your thoughts on that?
I can't argue with it, and to critique my own performance as well, because I've been on Souths, and so I've kind of fallen into this trap. I don't shy away from backing my opinion. I don't write teams off too quickly or jump aboard too quickly either, as others do. And I think not overreacting served me, pretty well for a period of time. But the issue is, when I see a team underperforming, I really want to try and figure out what's gone wrong and, whether there's areas of improvement. And what I have to also remember is that sometimes things are going wrong for factors that I don't know or understand from the outside. And, and if that leads to an ununified squad or, the whole being less than the sum of the parts, then you're going to keep backing a side that you're going to perceive as value, but it's not going to be there. And look, we had called it Souths out. We had watched them closely, multiple games, and called out bad habits, lack of urgency, lack of attention to detail in this run. But rather than seeing those as tells of maybe a rotten, toxic environment, I saw them as correctable. I saw them as so easily fixed with a bit more focus, heightened effort. And so that's where I thought we could back Souths, but the effort was there for all to see on Sunday. Shame on South Sydney and shame on me for falling for it. We both still have a little bit of time this year to maybe redeem. It's only going to be solved with hard work, something that I can never guarantee for the teams I tip, but I can at least guarantee it goes into my tips.
And for the Bunnies, I guess the final point that I found really interesting today was, I think it might have been Dave Riccio, as a News Corp journalist. They made the point that when Wayne Bennett was in charge, he gave Latrell Mitchell a lot of freedom to go back home during the week. And those things are all well and good. But now Bennett's gone and Latrell's not at his peak form. The report back's going to get a few other players sitting there and going, well, hey, why don't we get to do what we want throughout the week? Or why don't we get to, have all this time off, which would be really dissettling for a side as well. So yeah, plenty of speculation, rumors, reports around the Bunnies right now. Fingers crossed round 27 against the Roosters is a barn burner with 8 sin bins this time. Raiders v Broncos. We're at GIO Stadium. The line is set at -10.5 in the Broncos' favour. Who will be without Adam Reynolds? So Jock Madden is their halfback. Corey Oates also returns for his 200th NRL game. For the Raiders, they're without a star half as well. Jack Whiten is in reserves and unlikely. Albert Hopewadi returns on the wing. How do you see this one, mate? Because it's second versus 6, but it probably doesn't feel that way based on this line and recent form, does it?
No, I think I said a week ago, nobody sees the Raiders as the 6th best team. They just keep managing to win games. It wasn't that hard to do so at home against the Dogs last week either. Still, that 13-plus win is elusive, and I don't see it happening this round, but they got the job done. However, we've talked a bit about analysing the ladder and how is it going to play out. It does kind of look like the Raiders may still require one more win to play finals footy, and this is their last home game, and it's against Brisbane. That's no easy win, but next week's away to at Shark Park, so the job's not done. So I do shout out Kyle in our group who tipped Raiders miss the 8, just because he got $10 odds, this week about that. If they have to win one more game, then $10 for them to lose out. Obviously, a couple other teams will have to win to leapfrog, such as North Queensland. We know somebody's going to win Roosters Souths unless it does end as a tie, as you suggested, which you couldn't rule out. But point being that Canberra have got to turn up for this one. Brisbane come in, rested, cooling their jets over the bye. They'll be hoping that the Reynolds setback's not major. But in any case, we've seen, Madden can do a good job, but more importantly, so much other talent around that can step up into a larger role. We saw that demonstrated up in North Queensland. And the Broncos, it's funny, I'm sure they'd love to win the minor prem, but it's like they're probably not too fussed either because it's not the primary objective and it's, somewhat not in their control. But they'd certainly love to win to keep that pressure on and to keep their options, fully open going into round 27. There's an additional motivator that the Raiders have already sprung an ambush on the Bronx at Suncorp, so I'm sure Brisbane wants to turn the tables. And you mentioned the ins and outs, but there is degrees of doubt over Hopewadi. You'd have to say Whiten because you wouldn't know the severity of that hammy, and Horsburgh, although they've said he will play after the head knock. So I won't go as far as backing Brisbane, although I can see the reasons why they'd win. Like the line's now climbed up into double digits, and they do have an outstanding away record. But I guess it's not a true must win, and the importance for Canberra and being at home and being a double-digit line keeps me off it.
And I know I follow the NRL physio really closely, and what he says for hamstring injuries is generally, even the most minor ones, take about 2 weeks. So I think I'd be shocked to see Whiten play. Even though he is named in reserves. I wonder if that's a bit of mind games from Ricky, just to keep Kevy thinking about it. So I don't know. You mentioned that it's not quite a must-win game. And I look at while you're talking, I had to look at the stats because they are against the Sharks next week. They actually haven't lost to the Sharks since 2018. They got a marvelous record over the Sharkies, so maybe that's a little trump card in their favor at this stage. You look at these two sides on the ladder. There's 4 wins separating this year. Broncos, 213 positive points differential. Raiders, negative 108. That's a 300-point split. And there's only 4 wins separating these sides. Is that unheard of? If there's a 300-point slip, I've said it again, split in 4 games. That's like, what the hell? It's like an average of 80 difference. It's crazy to think. Raiders are 4 from 5 recently against the Broncos. And, of course, one of those wins was in round 6 this year, which was actually the Broncos' first loss of 2023 at Suncorp. I remember the Broncos were heavily favoured, and they just did not play to their potential that night. The Reynolds loss is a big factor we have to consider. but they are 4 from 6 without him this year. So they are capable of winning without him. And of course, the Raiders are also missing their key half in White, and as we touched on, I do like Broncos here. I probably do prefer them at the line, but I just know that the Raiders, particularly when we look at the ladder and all the stats I just threw up there, they're a chance of just throwing up something strange. No one expecting to beat the Broncos in round 6. No one expects them to win or compete here. And I probably give them, honestly, about a 30% chance of winning here, just for that quote-unquote strange factor where they seem to win games that they probably shouldn't, or they're in games that they shouldn't. I'm going to stay away from this one with an official pick because you could make arguments to both, but there is that chance Raiders pull the big upset here again, in my opinion.
And shout out to Ryan and Benny in the comments that they're obviously clarifying what I said. Like, there is a chance the Raiders may need one more win to get in. That doesn't mean they have to. They could lose, but I just don't think Canberra can rely on that. I guess Canberra will know by Saturday night if the Cowboys had won the night before, but especially if the Cowboys had won, it applies the pressure. We just, none of us know what Penrith's going to toss out in round 27. So you're right that as Ryan comments, the Cowboys would have to win both their games, but I don't think Canberra can rely on that. And I also don't think Canberra can rely on a good historical record against the Sharks, because on current form, Canberra goes into that game as an underdog as well.
Yeah, they do. I mean, you can win over a team or you want the pass. It doesn't matter for current odds. And I know Raiders aren't that sort of team either, where they're going to start looking at, do we have to win or can we make it mathematically? I was in their change rooms a few years ago now, and I was interviewing some of their coaching staff, and their point was, and this was in the final round of the regular season in 2019, maybe. And the point their coaching staff was making was it doesn't matter when you get to finals, you have to be capable of beating everyone any day. So the Raiders will certainly be keeping that same mindset in these last few weeks and probably not doing much ladder watching, in my opinion. Sunday afternoon footy, it's Bulldogs v Sea Eagles at Accor Stadium, and the line is set at -5.5 in Manly's favour, where Tolatu Kola moves to fullback. Brad Parker goes into the centres. Josh Schuster is dropped, and Gordon Chan Kum Tong, who looked pretty good in the trials. He's named for his NRL debut at 14. For the Bulldogs, one change, Ocken bought out, Curtis Morin in. When this is one of those games where, to break it down, you're looking at two sides that are playing for pride. There's not too much to tip off right here. So how do you see it when you look at this one?
You know what? Sorry, something crossed my mind. I thought I'd just say it. It's kind of funny. Like, the ultimate 4D chess move for the Raiders would be to lose by like 100 or 120 to Brisbane, because it could actually give Brisbane the superior points difference to the Panthers. And it could actually mean that the Panthers need to play their full strength against the Cowboys in round 27. But I don't think they'd do that. But for some reason, I said it anyway. As for this game, yeah, I'm playing the Bulldogs. They're playing, with the start there, because I'm not convinced who should be favourite in this game. I think the talent is pretty evenly matched. There were certain players like Kikau and Addo Carr that had injuries that lingered later into the year, where they could have shut them down. But to bring these guys back, I think there is still some motivation to see some improvement after what's been a pretty sad first season for Ciraldo. So I know the Dogs were so pitiful against the Knights a couple of weeks ago and not great against Canberra, certainly fell away, but they kind of came to play. It was level scores at halftime. Whereas Manly, look, you give them a lot of credit going over to New Zealand, and that they only had mathematical finals hopes, and they did match it with New Zealand. And you get a different call there on that Garrick incident. Maybe you get the upset win, but now I just feel like it never bodes well for a team that's kind of claiming they were robbed, and Seabold had his blow up in him, and now Garrick's going to be out as well. That's official, right? Because I've heard like he could play.
You can play through the pain, but it's unlikely,
right.
I would say.
It seems crazy to me. So I know the Dogs rolled Manly very early in the year at Brookie, so I have mentioned when a return fixture, maybe the team can draw upon that. But for me, at this stage in the year, I question motivation of both sides. It's not a high conviction that I've got in the Bulldogs, but it's more, if it's a coin toss and I can get, I was willing to play 4.5, but again, play the 6.5 if you like the sound of that bet on Sporties, because I looked around again, they were the outlier. Nobody else had bounced back up, so I didn't think we copped some horrendous personnel luck during our live show. I actually think I would tip the Dogs. I know tipping comps are hotting up as well. And look, if you're in front, you might just want to play it safe. But if you need to make something happen, the Dogs is probably like my favorite upset play of the round.
Yeah, it's a coin flip, this one. Absolutely, it is. Largest ever win in professional rugby league history here in Australia was by St. George in 1935. On the 11th of May, they defeated the Bulldogs 91-6. So if the Raiders can live up to your previous prediction, which was obviously a very serious one, they'll be record breakers, baby. And they already are with their for and against at the moment. But I hate picking games like this onto this one because the motivation for both sides realistically probably has to be internally created. With the season over, there's not too much external motivation to kind of assess. E.g., the Bulldogs aren't looking at sides above them and saying, well, I know if we win, we can jump to 9th and give ourselves a chance. Neither are the Sea Eagles. So for that reason, if I had to say, I would play it safe and say Manly. The spine is quite similar between both sides until you get to DCE. And his experience could be enough to get the Sea Eagles home here. It will also be, I believe, Tavita Pangai Jr.'s final home game for the Bulldogs. So it'll be very interesting to see what they make of that as a club, I suppose, and if the players do draw inspiration from that. I'm not sure how popular he is amongst the playing group, but this one for me, the reason why it's so hard to give a prediction is I look at it one way. I think this could be a try-fest, an absolute high scorer where both sides just throw all defense out the window and it's a try-fest. But there's also every opportunity it could be a low, dull game. I think it really depends on the attitude of both sides. And they've both had mixed attitudes this year, where some games they've rocked up and defended really well, other games they haven't. So it's so difficult to make a read here. Manly are 8 from 9 recently against the Bulldogs. So gun to my head, I'll say they'll win. But because I've got it as a coin flip, I probably prefer the Bulldogs from a betting perspective, just because you get a little bit of extra value there, I suppose.
And in the comments, Luke, who often, adds really insightful opinions on the games, is in kind of disbelief that I like the Dogs here and says as if the Dogs are good. Well, define good, they're bottom 4, but they've got some better players back that they didn't have for the middle rounds of the year. I think they're on par with Manly, who, of course, missing Turbo. That's such a big difference to their ceiling. So it's not so much me having to make the case why I'm so certain about the Dogs. It's really I don't expect a lot from Manly. So I suppose I'd be interested to hear from Luke. If you want to play Manly, where's the massive edge or where's the confidence, on that side of the handicap?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Manly have 2 more wins this year. Both sides have negative point differentials. Bulldogs are 4-7 at home. Sea Eagles are 4-7 away. So it's kind of like, we're not really, I guess, saying that the Bulldogs are world beaters and they're the best side and you got to tip them. It's comparative to who they're playing in this one to get the value beating the Sea Eagles. Example, we're not going to tip the Doggies if they're playing the Panthers, most notably. Let's jump into our final game of the round. It's the Knights v Sharks at McDonald Jones again. The Knights might as well set up tents at home at this point. They're always there. They're 3.5 favourites, and they do welcome back Jackson Hastings at halfback. No changes for the Sharks. For me, I look at this one. I think it looms as game of the round, Winnie. But I want to get your thoughts on whether you think this will be game of the round and the game as a whole, please.
I think this will be game of the round. I definitely agree with you there. But my computer seems playing up on me. Can I let you start us off with your angle, and then I'll put a bow on it?
Absolutely. I think you have to tip the Knights here, just because of their win streak. Now, the Sharks have rebuilt themselves from a 3-game losing skid to a 3-game win streak. And they did completely shut at the Cowboys in Townsville last round for Jason Taumalolo's 250th. So you do have to respect this Sharks side and where they're at currently. They've really found their spine with Tracy there instead of Kennedy at this stage. Respect the Sharks, and they are capable of a few upsets. Most notably, I'd say the Rabbitohs in Perth, which was actually the game to snap their current winning streak. But it's just the confidence these Knights are playing with. Their attack is so fun to watch, and that's where the praise is going, which is definitely deserved. But their defense has arguably been better. Now, I know they're missing tackles. I know they're not the best statistic defensive side in the competition, but it's their goal line hustle. They seem to hold up a lot of tries or save them at the last moment, and they are only averaging 12 points on their current win streak against them. So only 12 points conceded per game on average. I have to think if they play to that standard and keep the Sharks somewhere around that amount, the snapshot of the last 7-game win streak, they probably score at least 4 or 5 tries, you'd think. I'm going to say Knights here. I think Kalen Ponga is going to be right down that left side again. So you got to include Greggy Marzu for an anytime try, in my opinion. So my play, Knights at the line, Marzu anytime try scorer. How do you see this one?
Yeah, close to a best bet as well in terms of playing Newcastle. So I just think something that, I've always felt, but I've missed out on, and it's been a bit of a downfall of the last couple of weeks, is when you get a team that's, especially coming off a downtrodden season, like Newcastle were bottom 4 a year ago, and, a lot of question marks about coaching, about ability, and just it wasn't really a happy or winning environment. And I always thought someone like Kalen Ponga was, as talented a fullback as we had in the NRL, but everyone would tell you Dylan Edwards is way better, Pappenhausen's way better, but it's just those guys played in winning teams, and we didn't get to see what Ponga could do on the back of a team that was on the front foot going forward. And, these are among the many reasons why I liked the Knights for my most improved team of the year. But then they actually had a struggling start to the year. That's the crazy thing. The Knights had a pretty winnable or manageable draw the first kind of 8 to 10 weeks of this season. Didn't take advantage of it for numerous reasons late in games. And so then I thought they've probably just wasted that. But as we know, now they've harnessed the momentum. And what I'm getting back to is you've got a squad where the energy and the belief is there, and they're not necessarily used to that. So they're going to play better than what we're really accustomed to seeing from so many of these guys. And we're seeing a lot of these players have career best seasons. As for the Sharkies, they've recently rediscovered success. It's kind of come along with Fitzgibbon taking over, but they came second last year. So I've still questioned, some of those wins by the Sharks. Now that win over the Rabbitohs doesn't look as impressive because the Rabbitohs are a bit of an internal mess. I thought that the Cowboys were so disappointing. I know you can only play as well as your opponent lets you, but I thought North Queensland was so lifeless for the final kind of 60 last week. So when you look at it, like how impressive has the Sharks win streak been, and then this Knights home advantage is a real deal as well. So I just worry about playing the Knights. It's kind of seems too obvious because they've looked as good as they could possibly look for multiple weeks now. So it's kind of like late to the party to jump on them now, which is why I've just begrudgingly left it alone. But I do think the Knights are going to win. And I think we could look back on this year and say 1 or 2 games ended differently. The Knights would have been a top 4 side. Not to mention the fact that Ponga has been unbelievably good and missed like essentially 2 months of the season.
No doubt in my mind, if he plays fullback the whole year, they're a top 4 side. I think some of those tight losses they had, he probably overturns.
Well, go to week one, people forget, and I had a best bet on the Knights, so I don't forget. The Knights were only down 2 points in New Zealand, and Ponga got sent for a bogus HIA where he actually hadn't hit his head, and they had repeat sets on the Warriors line. They didn't have Ponga, and then they actually let in a late try. But I feel like the Knights could have won that. They could have gone on a different trajectory, because the reason my 15-1s and 17-1s Knights ladder handicap and Knights most improved tips won't actually win is they're going to come second to New Zealand. And it's painful to think that may have actually been decided in round 1 in the final 15 minutes of that game.
It's very true. I bought the stats for the Knights only conceding an average of 12. I wish I had prepared what the Sharks were averaging, just to sort of get that mathematical read there. You mentioned Kalen Ponga's talent. 2018, he moves to the Knights. He's only played 9 games at that stage for the Cowboys, mostly on the wing. He gets 27 Dally M points. That wins the Dally M medal some years. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck did beat him with 29 points, but Kalen Ponga that year only played 20 games. Give him another 6 games, he's probably a Dally M medalist in all honesty, and with respect to Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. So when you say Kalen Ponga has absolutely had the talent for years, I completely buy into it. I completely believe you, and I think it's a great, great take. The talent's always been there for this guy.
Ryan says the Knights are $41 to miss the 8. So just to be clear, he's asking, wouldn't that just involve a 2-leg multi? I think you're not far off. I think the Knights are in that same scenario as the Raiders, because the Raiders have 1 more point than the Knights, but terrible points differential. So if the Knights lose their final 2 games, and if the Cowboys win their final 2, because either the Rabbitohs or the Roosters are going to get it. Sorry, and the Roosters will beat the Tigers. It is true that 8 teams could finish on 32 or more, and the Knights currently only have 31. So as successful as this year's been, they do need one more win to be sure.
Yes, only 2 sides could jump them because Roosters and Rabbitohs have to play each other. But certainly if Cowboys won both or vice versa, Rabbitohs or Roosters. So the 3 sides below them would need to win their remaining 2.
Well, no, the Rabbitohs and Roosters can't both jump the Knights, but one of them certainly can. So then it comes down to, can the Cowboys as well? And we've discussed it. Cowboys are favourites this week with an X factor around 27. So it all goes back to the point that Newcastle have generated all this great momentum. They certainly can't put the Q in the rack yet this regular season.
So they both can't. Yeah, you're right. So that would put the Knights down to so they could finish as low as 9th. So they could just miss. Their points differential is 129 though. If we go off the,
it doesn't matter though because they got the draw.
Yeah,
so they're going to be 31.
And no one else will finish on 31. Yeah, interesting. I don't know if I like that bet.
No, it's one of those ones that's probably not going to win. They're probably going to play finals. But for value, that jumps out at me. I say kudos. Who found that? That was Ryan in the comments. So these are the extra little gems you might find tuning into the TryPod that are brought to you by our followers, not just us.
Yeah, it's unlikely, but Sharks a tough game. And then they've got the Dragons next week. Stranger things have happened in rugby league, particularly in round 27, when I was beating you all year in that tipping challenge we had a few years ago. And then I tipped I tipped Storm and you tipped Dragons. And Storm said,
Dragons.
We're going to rest our entire side. And you got Dragons at like $6.50 odds. And I think they closed at like $1.80. Like one of the wildest turnarounds you've ever seen. Oh, I'll remember it. I'll remember it till I die. No, I'm really joking because I take it that serious. But that was a really fun thing when we did do that. But that is going to just about do us for our show tonight, guys. We want to say thank you very much to everyone that was here live with us and to those listening as a podcast later. And we'll be back on Sunday around 6:15-ish p.m. to recap all of our best bets and all the action. So best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Have a great, fun, safe weekend. And thank you very much. Over to you, Winnie, to farewell the show.
Thanks again to everyone who tuned in. Let me know what you think of my 3 best bets and the mixed matchup or where I may have gone wrong again this week. And best of luck whether you play them or on your own plays. Enjoy the penultimate regular season round. We'll be back on Sunday. Have a great weekend, guys. Lego.